From the second-floor terrace of my $4.5 million home in the Florida Keys, I watched the sun bleed into the water and hit send. $15,000. That was the number my father, Richard, swore would save his credit score. He called it an emergency. He called it temporary. He called me his only hope. The confirmation appeared on my screen. Transfer complete. 2 seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from him. I was already half smiling, waiting for gratitude, or at the very least, acknowledgement. Instead, I read the words that would end our relationship forever. Christmas is at the house this year. Real family only. We need the photos to look right for Lila's new fiance. Stay in Florida. He took my money and erased me in the same breath. Before I tell you exactly how I made them regret that text for the rest of their lives, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone into the ocean. I just stared at the screen, while the quiet of my empty house wrapped around me like a blanket that had finally stopped pretending to be warm. My name is Nora. I'm 29 years old, and in that moment, standing barefoot on cool marble in a house my father didn't even know existed, I finally understood my role in this family. I wasn't a daughter. I was a line item, not a child but an asset, a portfolio component, a high-yield product he'd been managing for 2 decades. For 20 years, I'd been trained to believe that love was something you purchased. If I got straight A's, I bought a smile. If I stayed quiet, I bought a night without yelling. If I paid off his $15,000 credit card bill, I thought I was buying the right to be acknowledged. I had miscalculated the exchange rate. My money was good enough to rescue his credit report, but my face wasn't good enough to appear in his Christmas photos. The text threw me back to a memory I thought I'd buried. Thanksgiving. I was 10 years old. The house smelled like turkey and garlic and floor polish. Richard and my older sister Lila sat at the formal dining table with the guests, laughing over crystal glasses and linen napkins. I was at the kitchen island, 20 feet away, eating a ham sandwich off a chipped plate. Because there wasn't enough room at the adult table, I felt invisible then, like an afterthought that needed to be stored somewhere out of sight. Standing on that balcony in the Keys, with ocean wind tangling my hair, and a house key in my pocket bearing only my name on the deed, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt expensive. They thought I was the struggling black sheep because I didn't wear designer logos and I drove a boring, reliable car. They assumed I was scraping by in some cramped apartment, still trying to find myself. They had no idea I just sold the core patent from my machine learning startup for $15 million in cash. They had no idea this estate wasn't a rental. It was bought, paid for, and quietly titled under an LLC they would never trace back to me. They had used my $15,000 to prop up the appearance of a life I wasn't invited into, all because Lila's new fiancé, Evan, supposedly didn't like my energy. I glanced at my banking app. $15 million for $100,000. I rubbed my eyes, trying to squeeze out even one tear over the text I'd just received. Nothing came. No heartbreak. Just clarity. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a transaction. They had simply informed me that my contract as family had expired. They wanted real family only. Fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for. I opened my contacts. Not the favorites list. Not the people who already knew about my new life. I scrolled down to the names that had been quietly pushed to the edges of Richard's universe. The people he had decided were expendable. The outcasts. I stopped at Aunt Marina. 3 years ago, Richard banned her from holidays because she got divorced and had the audacity to grieve openly. He said her heavy energy ruined the vibe. Last I heard, she was living in a cramped studio in Ohio, teaching art classes part-time and fighting seasonal depression alone. Next, I found the Garcias. Tom and Elena are old neighbors from the cul-de-sac. Richard had sued them over a fence line just because he could, then bragged about winning for weeks. Their kids stopped playing outside. After that, I didn't hesitate. I didn't run the numbers. I started booking first-class tickets, airport drivers with their names printed on tablets, rooms at the nearest five-star resort for overflow guests. I wasn't just hosting a party. I was assembling a jury. I texted Marina, "Pack a bag. You're coming to the beach. Bring a swimsuit." A typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then came back. Finally, her reply landed. "Are you serious? I only have my old one piece. I don't want to be in anyone's way." "You're not in the way," I wrote back. "You're the guest of honor." Christmas morning cracked open over the Gulf of Mexico like a promise someone finally intended to keep. I checked the weather up north. In Chicago, it was -18 degrees with wind chills that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. News alerts warned of a historic blizzard and a power grid teetering on the edge of failure. I pictured Richard in his drafty Midwestern house, wearing 3 cashmere sweaters and calling it cozy while the ancient furnace rattled like it was begging for retirement. I pictured Leela staging hot cocoa photos for Instagram, pretending the flickering lights were ambience instead of a dying circuit. Here on Sunset Key, the sky was postcard blue, 82 degrees. The air smelled like salt, sunscreen, and jasmine drifting from the hedges. I walked out to the pool deck. My guests were already settling in. Aunt Marina was stretched out on a white chaise under a wide umbrella. I'd sent a stylist and a glam team to her room that morning. The woman Richard had written off as dowdy and depressing was now wearing a flowing turquoise caftan with delicate gold jewelry and oversized sunglasses. Her gray-streaked hair was blown out and soft around her face. She didn't look like a cautionary tale. She looked like a woman who had finally remembered she was allowed to take up space. She was laughing at something Tom Garcia said. He stood beside her in linen shirts and a Hawaiian shirt, holding a coconut drink like he'd been born in paradise instead of a snow-choked suburb. I walked over and handed Marina a glass of vintage champagne. Her hand trembled as she took it. Her eyes shone, not with sadness for once, but with disbelief. Nor, she whispered, "I've never experienced anything like this. I thought I'd spend today grading papers and watching reruns alone." I squeezed her fingers gently. "You're not background anymore, Marina. You're VIP. This wasn't just a party. It was evidence, and evidence should be documented." I had hired a full production crew, cinematographer, sound tech, drone operator. No shaky phone footage, no half-filtered selfies. I wanted clear, irrefutable proof that the people my father considered baggage were thriving in the sunshine without him. The crew set a long banquet table along the dock, feet from the water, heavy white linen tablecloths, polished flatware, place cards with every guest's name hand-lettered in gold ink. The food looked like a magazine spread celebrating excess. Stone crab claws on ice, grilled lobster tails, roasted vegetables glistening with herb butter, platters of tropical fruit, desserts that belong in galleries. The wine list alone could have covered Richard's monthly car payment 3 times over. I took my seat at the head of the table. The drone operator raised his hand. "Ready?" The drone whirred to life and soared higher, capturing the entire estate. The infinity pool, the palm trees swaying gently, the private stretch of beach, and most importantly, the collection of so-called rejects clinking glasses and grinning like they had just been released from a very long, very stupid audition. I looked up at the camera and smiled. Not the small, apologetic smile I used to wear at Richard's table. A real smile. One that said without a single word that I had earned this and none of them could take it away. When the footage came back to the crew's monitor, we picked the best sequence and did a quick edit right there by the pool. Smooth cuts, warm color grading, gentle background music. Perfect. I opened Instagram. My thumb hovered over the share button. I knew exactly what this would ignite. For years, keeping quiet had bought me occasional invitations and polite contempt at best. Peace purchased through self-erasure is in peace. It's surrender. I selected a thumbnail of Marina mid-left, a lobster claw in one hand, her head thrown back in pure joy, radiant, unbothered, free. Then I wrote the caption. It needed to be precise, not a tantrum, a statement, hosting Christmas for the people who stood by me when I had nothing to offer but myself. To the real family shivering in the Midwest, I hope the 15,000 I wired keeps the heat on. You're going to need it. I hit share. The progress bar slid to completion. Posted. I turned my phone face down on the table. The black screen reflected the forwarders sent back at me like a mirror. I didn't wait for likes. I didn't refresh obsessively. I picked up my glass and turned to Marina. To real family. I said. She tapped her glass gently against mine. To real family. The quiet didn't last long. 10 minutes later, my phone began vibrating against the marble tabletop like a trapped insect trying to escape. I ignored it. It buzzed, paused, buzzed again, slowly migrating across the table with every incoming call. Finally, curiosity won. I flipped it over. 40 to missed calls in 1 hour. Richard, Leela, Richard again. An unknown number that had to be Evan. Then Richard. Over and over. Like a stuck record desperate to be heard, I put the phone on speaker and played the first voicemail, letting my past leak through the speakers and drift over the clink of cutlery. In the rhythm of waves, Richard's voice filled the air, tight and artificially calm. The tone he used when trying to sell a bad investment as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Nor, pick up the phone. People are calling me. They're saying you're in Key West. Is that place even yours? Is this some kind of urban stunt? Take that post down. You're confusing everyone. Next message. 10 minutes later. The polish had cracked. You ungrateful little brat. Do you have any idea who follows your sister? Her fiance's mother just called in a panic. She thinks we're bankrupt because of what you wrote. Delete it? No. I skipped ahead. Lila's voice shrieked through the speaker with no attempt at composure. You ruined my Christmas aesthetic. Nor. Why would you tag Aunt Marina? Why is she wearing a caftan? What even is that? You're embarrassing me in front of everyone. Take it down, or I swear I'll tell people you stole that money. You've always been jealous of me. I took a slow sip of wine. Stole the money, I repeated under my breath. That's creative. I glanced at the post analytics, already shared 400 times, comments flooding in faster than I could read them. Strangers were tagging Richard's business account. So this is your loser daughter? Why is she paying your heating bill? Real family doesn't freeze their kids out, but still cash their checks. People love a villain, but what they love even more is watching a villain get publicly outmaneuvered. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because, for the first time in decades, I had seized the one asset they value most. The narrative, for as long as I could remember, the story had been simple. I was the needy one. They were the providers. I was the problem. They were the heroes for tolerating me. I was lucky they acknowledged me at all. 1 60-second drone video had shattered that script entirely. Now the world could see that the black sheep was actually the one paying the bills while the perfect family begged in the background. Panic sounds loud when people realize they're losing control. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb, slid it to the far end of the table, and returned to my key lime pie. We watched the sun melt into the water. The sky shifted from gold to pink to deep violet. We told stories and laughed until our sides ached. For the first time in my life, a holiday didn't feel like walking barefoot across broken glass. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had dropped it myself. But people like Richard don't fade quietly when you stop obeying. They escalate. At 2 in the morning, the security panel in my bedroom chimed. Motion detected. Main gate. I grabbed a rope and walked to the wall monitor. The night vision camera showed a rental sedan idling at the wrought iron gate, headlights cutting through the darkness like interrogation lamps. 2 figures stood in the beams, hammering on the metal. Even in grainy black and white, I recognized the jerky, frantic movements. Richard, Leela, they hadn't just called. They had booked last-minute tickets on Christmas Day, flown 1,500 miles, paid holiday surge rental prices, and driven the overseas highway in a blind rage. They weren't here to reconcile. They were here to reestablish control. I watched Richard kick the gate. On the monitor, he looked small, not the towering, all-powerful presence I remembered from childhood. but like a furious child pounding on a machine that had finally eaten his last coin. I wasn't afraid. I pressed the intercom button. My voice echoed from the speaker at the gate. Calm and cool in the heavy night air. Turn around and go home. Richard, you're trespassing. His head snapped up. Searching for the camera, I slipped on sandals and started down the long shell driveway. Humidity wrapped around me like a second skin. Crickets sang in the brush. Security lights flared on in sequence as I walked, casting long shadows ahead of me. I didn't hurry. I let them feel the distance. Let them stew in it. By the time I reached the gate, Richard was gripping the bars so hard his knuckles had gone bone white. His hair was wild. His travel clothes were wrinkled and damp with sweat. Open this gate, he screamed, rattling the iron. You think you can humiliate us in front of the whole world? I am your father. You owe me this house. You owe me everything you have. I stopped 5 feet back, just beyond grabbing range. The metal safely between us. For the first time in my life, I really looked at him. Not as dad, as a man who had lost his favorite tool. Psychologists have a term for what I was witnessing. Extinction burst. It's what happens when a manipulator presses the old buttons: guilt, fear, obligation, threats, and nothing happens. Healthy people recalibrate. They reflect. They ask what went wrong. Narcissists don't. They hit the button harder. They scream louder. They flail wildly because their brains cannot comprehend that their favorite game might actually be over. Richard wasn't here because he missed me. He was here because his personal ATM had grown a spine and a security system. I don't owe you anything, Richard, I said, my voice slicing through his volume. You made that clear. Remember? Real family only. That text was a misunderstanding. He roared, spit flying through the bars. You know that. Now open this gate, or I call the police and tell them you stole my credit card to pay for all this. I almost laughed. Please do, I said. Make that call. That's when Leela stepped out from behind him. She wasn't shrieking anymore. She was smiling. It was the coldest, most satisfied expression I had ever seen cross her face. She held a thick manila folder in one manicured hand. Let him call the cops. Dad, she purred. We don't need them. We came prepared. She slid the folder between the bars with a dramatic flourish. What's that? I asked. Leverage, she said, opening it with practiced theatricality. She pulled out a stapled packet stamped with an old notary seal. Remember this? The family support agreement Dad made us sign at 18? The one stating that any assets developed while living under his roof belonged to the family trust. My stomach tightened. I remembered I was 17, standing at the kitchen counter, Richard lecturing about responsibility and teamwork. Me signing without reading, because saying no was never an option. I had filed it away mentally under empty threats and forgotten it existed. You build your little AI project in our basement. Nor, Leela said, her voice dripping with contempt, using Dad's electricity, Dad's internet, eating Dad's food. Technically, that $15 million is family money. Our money. She lifted another document, already filled out and waiting. We're not leaving until you sign this quitclaim deed, she continued. You transfer this property to the family trust. Half for Dad, half for me. You can keep whatever scraps remain. She pressed the papers flat against the bars with a pen balanced on top. Sign it, she commanded, or we sue you for everything, not just this house. Every cent. You won't just lose this place, nor you'll lose your precious freedom too. For a single heartbeat, everything went still. The air, the insects, the rustle of palm fronds. She thought she had cornered me. She thought this was checkmate. I started laughing. Not warm laughter. Cold, brittle, almost soundless. The kind of laugh that communicates one thing clearly. You have absolutely no idea how badly you just miscalculated. You really flew across the country with a contract I signed as a minor, under duress, thinking it supersedes federal intellectual property law. I said, you brought a butter knife to a sword fight. Lila's smile flickered. But you did make one very useful mistake, I continued. You keep talking about that $15,000 I sent. I pulled my phone from my pocket and woke the screen. You keep telling everyone I paid your bill, Richard, I said. You should have read the beneficiary line more carefully. I held the phone up so they could see clearly. That transfer didn't go to your credit card company, I explained. It went to Lakeview Community Bank, Special Assets Division. Richard squinted, confusion crumbling his face. You haven't paid your mortgage in 8 months, I continued. The bank classified your loan as distressed and wanted it off their books before year-end. Banks talk when you call with 8 figures in your account. They talk a lot. I swiped to the next document, a digital deed of trust assignment. I didn't pay your bills, Richard, I said evenly. I bought your debt. The words hung suspended in the humid air. I own your house now, your roof, your driveway, your front porch. Legally speaking, I'm your bank. Lila's face drained to the color of copy paper. She grabbed at the phone through the bars. I was scanning the screen desperately. They locked on one phrase, assignment of note and deed of trust. New lien holder. Nora Hartwell, trustee. This says you're the lien holder, she whispered. Correct, I replied. And right now, I'm not your daughter or your sister. I'm the financial institution you just attempted to extort. On camera, I'm my dad. Richard's expression crumbled as my words landed. I was planning to wait until January, I said. Let you have one last holiday under that roof. But since you showed up at my gate waving fraudulent leverage and making threats, I tapped the screen. I accelerated the loan. Foreclosure proceedings begin immediately. Richard's phone chimed in his pocket. He fumbled with shaking hands to pull it out. His face went gray as he read the notification. It's freezing back home, he whispered, suddenly diminished, smaller than I had ever seen him. Where are we supposed to go? I tilted my head slightly. I heard you have real family somewhere, I said. I'm sure they'll be delighted to help. Lila's composure shattered completely, the mask cracking straight down the center. What about my wedding? She shrieked. Where am I supposed to host my engagement party? What am I supposed to tell Evan's family? You won't be telling them anything about the house, I said calmly. Your names are on those accounts. When the foreclosure hits your credit report tomorrow morning, you'll be lucky if anyone trusts you with a folding chair rental. Two security guards emerged from the shadows near the gate. Having witnessed enough. Sir, Mum, you're trespassing on private property, one of them said firmly. You need to return to your vehicle immediately. Richard puffed up one final time, attempting to resurrect the voice that used to paralyze me as a child. You can't do this to me, he shouted past the guard. I am your father. I made you. After everything I've done, you're yelling at a lender, sir. The guard interrupted flatly. And you're damaging her gate. I strongly suggest you don't make this situation worse. Lila backed toward the rental car, still hurling threats over her shoulder. We'll sue you, Nor. We'll tell everyone you're a fraud. You think this makes you look good? It doesn't. Enjoy being completely alone in your stupid mansion. They climbed into the car. The taillights flared red, then shrank as they reversed, turned, and vanished down the dark road. I watched until the headlights disappeared entirely. The night reclaimed the silence they had ripped apart. My legs felt strangely light as I walked back up the driveway, past the swaying palms, past the soft blue glow of the pole lights, back to my life, back to the laughter still drifting from the guest wing where Marina and the Garcias were sharing stories deep into the early morning hours. I slipped inside, poured myself a glass of water, and sat for a quiet moment at the kitchen island. The same kind of place where I had once been exiled and forgotten. Only now, this one belonged entirely to me. I opened the old family group chat on my phone. Family Hartwell clan, followed by a red heart emoji. I scrolled through years of history, guilt trips, demands for money, photos I was never invited to appear in, messages left permanently unread whenever I was the one reaching out. Then I pressed delete. Group removed. I stepped back outside and walked down to the dock. The moon painted a silver path across the dark water, stretching toward the horizon like a road leading somewhere better. I thought about 10-year-old me sitting alone at that Thanksgiving kitchen island, chewing a dry sandwich and pretending not to hear the laughter echoing from the dining room. I wished I could reach back through time, wrap my arms round that lonely girl, and whisper in her ear, "One day, you won't be begging for a seat at their table. You'll own the table, the house, the story, and more importantly, you'll finally own yourself." Richard and Lila believed they could maintain control forever, that no matter what I built or achieved, I would always remain that frightened, grateful child, desperate for their approval. They were catastrophically wrong. I didn't lose a family that night. I closed out a bad investment, and for the first time in my entire life, I understood something with absolute clarity. Walking away was never abandonment. It was freedom.